It is the winter of 1941. Across the cracked ice of the Baltic, a column of steel and men, 17,000 Wehrmacht soldiers, moves through what claims to be neutral territory. Their boots grind Swedish snow. Their rifle slings creak in the sub-zero hush. Stockholm is only hours away, yet no Swedish gun fires. A nation that once bestrode Europe now holds its breath, counting the freight cars, praying the world is not watching too closely. Tonight, Sweden's centuries-old vow of neutrality balances on a single, unspoken question. Can a moral compass survive when every cardinal point leads to a conqueror? This is the story of how Sweden, frozen, cornered, and rich with the very ore Hitler forges into tanks, learned that neutrality is not a fortress but a tightrope, and how, in walking it, she saved thousands, while still warming the furnaces of the Third Reich. To understand the impossible choices that follow, we must first travel north, above the Arctic Circle, to a plateau of iron that glistens like spilled mercury beneath the midnight sun. Here, the Kiruna mines exhale so pure an ore that one shipload can be transmuted into the steel of 1,000 artillery barrels. In 1939, Europe's great powers already know whoever owns this rock owns the tempo of the coming war. But the rock belongs to Sweden, a country that has spent 120 years trying to forget the smell of gunpowder. Once, Sweden had been the Lion of the North. Gustavus Adolphus once marched armies across the continent, turning the Baltic into a Swedish lake. Yet by the Congress of Vienna in 1815, the empire had bled itself white. Finland, lost to the Russian bear. Pomerania, Wismar Stralsund, stripped away. What remained was a rump kingdom hugging the Scandinavian peninsula, exhausted, introspective, and determined never again to gamble sons against cannon. Neutrality became not merely policy but national scripture, written into sermons, school books, even into the polite evasions of dinner party conversation. Thus, when the guns of August 1914 echoed, Sweden listened from the shoreline, sold iron to both camps, and survived the Great War intact, while Europe's youth fertilized the trenches. The 20s brought economic bruises. The 30s brought the fear that history, like a half-sleeping beast, might circle back. Inside the Riksdag, Foreign Minister Rickard Sandler, social democrat, idealist, warns that the next storm will be ideological, not merely territorial. But the coffers are thin, the army equipped with Great War relics, and public opinion clings to the myth that geography itself, forests, lakes, winter, will shield the north. Prague falls. Warsaw braces. And inside the granite walls of the Swedish Foreign Ministry, officials draft a new declaration. Sweden will regard any intrusion as an act of war against her neutrality. Yet even as the ink dries, the arithmetic of iron undercuts the bravado. Germany's blast furnaces already draw 6% of their lifeblood from Kiruna and Malmberget. Göring, master of the 4-year plan, snaps. Sweden can keep her king, her flag, her silly neutrality, so long as the ore keeps moving. London hears the same numbers. Chamberlain's cabinet debates mining Norwegian waters to stop the ore route down the leads. The Admiralty calls it the Stockholm Fiddle, a dance where Sweden promises Britain she will not raise exports, then quietly counts the newly annexed Czech, pits as pre-war German demand. In Berlin, Stockholm's legation shelters Jews under the guise of Swedish cultural attaches. Across Europe, the yellow cathedral flag becomes a fragile talisman against genocide. Yet even as Sweden shelters the hunted, her factories roar for the hunter. German coal, essential for Swedish homes, arrives in blockade-proof Swedish ships that hug the Norwegian coast. In exchange, Sweden exports precision ball bearings, high-grade iron, and machine tools. By 1943, these bearings keep Messerschmitt landing gear retracting, Tiger tank turrets swiveling. Allied intelligence estimates that every 5th German aircraft contains Swedish spheres of steel. Britain's economic warfare department fumes. American diplomats hint at precision bombing of strategic Swedish installations. Stockholm, sensing the tide, begins to curtail. First a 10% cut, then 20, then 50. By December 1944, the trade has virtually ceased. Sweden survives the winter on stockpiled German coal and, for the first time, American Lend-Lease fuel shipped through Murmansk and over Lapland's snowy roads. As the Reich contracts, Sweden tilts. Allied aircraft straying over Swedish airspace are guided to land, refuel, and depart, no longer interned. Stockholm's ports accept 200,000 refugees. Estonians fleeing the Soviet return, Latvian children, Norwegian resistance fighters. In secret, Sweden trains Danish and Norwegian police battalions. 13,000 men armed, drilled, and poised to reclaim Copenhagen and Oslo when liberation comes. They will march in May 1945 behind Swedish-supplied banners, welcomed by jubilant crowds, unaware of the quiet years of preparation. Victory in Europe arrives without Swedish blood on foreign fields, yet Sweden is changed. Post-war calculations are merciless. 75 million tons of iron ore flowed to Germany. 37 German troop transports crossed Swedish soil. 7,000 Danish Jews, 1,900 Norwegian Jews, and tens of thousands of others survived because Sweden opened her door when almost every other remained bolted. The ledger is neither clean nor simple. In 1946, a parliamentary commission labels the ore trade a necessary adaptation, prompting opposition leader Gunnar Myrdal to retort. History will ask not what was necessary, but what was right. The questions echo into our century. Can a small nation barter with monsters and still keep its soul? Does neutrality absolve complicity or merely postpone judgment? Sweden's wartime generation is fading. Grandchildren now confront archives that reveal both heroic visas and profit-led tonnages. Yet perhaps the most enduring lesson lies not in guilt or innocence, but in the fragile arithmetic of conscience. That in times when civilization itself is weighed in kilograms of ore and counted in train schedules, every decision, yes, no, maybe, tips the balance between the darkness and the dawn. The iron trains no longer run to Hamburg. The tightrope is stored away, a rusted relic in the national attic. But the memory remains that neutrality is not a mountain, immovable and pure. It is a rail line laid across a frozen river, trembling beneath the weight of every passing hour. Walk carefully, it whispers, for the ice sings songs of victory and shame in the same key, and history is always listening.